Hey everyone, and welcome back to part 5 of learning how to play Warhammer 40K 8th edition. Today we're going to be talking about the charge phase and the fight phase. So let's jump to the book. So if we go to the first part of the core rules again, we see this breakdown of the player turn. We've already talked about movement, psychic phase, shooting. We're now going to move to the charge phase and the fight phase. So if we just flip a couple pages, you'll see that both these phases are on the same page, which makes sense because they go hand in hand. So let's start with the charge phase. So if we look at the charge sequence here, this is going to require selecting a unit you're going to charge with, choosing the targets of the potential charge. Any enemy that's targeted as a charged unit get to fire Overwatch if they can, and then you're going to roll 2d6 to make the charge move. So let's see what each of those steps are in detail. So the first step in the charge sequence is to choose a unit to charge with. So if this is our scenario here, and we've got some Space Marines and some Chaos Space Marines, and let's say it's the Space Marines' turn still, and they get to decide if they are going to charge. So we'd be selecting them as our unit to charge with. Now there are some rules that you have to abide by when picking a unit to charge. For one, the unit has to be within 12 inches of an enemy that you can charge. So this is where we want our ruler. We're going to look at 12 inches, and of course in this case, the Space Marines are well within 12 inches of quite a few different enemy units. Additionally, you cannot select a unit to charge if they advanced or fell back this turn. And if you remember, advancing and falling back occurs in the movement phase. Advancing is when you roll that extra die to get a little bit of extra movement in the movement phase. And falling back is when at the beginning of your movement phase, you have a unit that's within 1 inch of an enemy unit and you choose to move away from them. You're falling back. But of course the penalty to falling back like this is that you can't shoot or charge in the same turn. So looking at these conditions, we know that this Space Marine unit is within 12 inches of these enemy units, which means that they can be selected as a unit to charge with. So now that we've selected the unit we're going to charge with, we also need to select the enemy units we're going to charge. And as said before, we need to select a unit that's within 12 inches of our unit here. In this case, of course, all 3 units are within range of this unit. An interesting thing about this phase is that you can actually select more than one enemy unit to charge. There's actually some reasons for this. Let's talk about them. First of all, you can actually charge more than one unit at a time. So in this case, if this unit wanted to lock both these enemy Chaos Marine units in close combat, they could declare a charge against both of them. If the charge succeeded, they could then move, maintaining coherency, to lock both of these units down. One of the other reasons to declare multiple charges is if maybe this Space Marine unit wanted to actually charge this Chaos Space Marine unit way over here, but they also didn't want to risk losing the charge or failing to roll high enough to get to these guys, so they also declare a charge against these closer Chaos Space Marines over here, just in case. So in this case, these Space Marines over here might be about 4 inches away, where these guys over here might be 5 or 6 inches away to get to. So just in case when we roll the die, we might select multiple units to be safe. A third reason that you're going to want to select multiple units sometimes is that if you're trying to get into close combat with maybe this unit over here, you have to maintain at least 1 inch away from a unit you did not declare in the charge. So in this case, I would have to make sure that this unit stays outside of 1 inch away from these guys because they were not selected as the target. Well, it seems like there's just no good reason then to not just declare a charge against every unit that's within 12 inches of you. And that could be the case sometimes, but there's actually also sort of a con to that as well. For one, any unit you declare a charge against gets to fire Overwatch at you, even if you don't end up charging them, which means before you get to make that move into assault, they get to shoot at you to try to maybe kill off any of your units. So let's talk about Overwatch and how that works. So let's say that this unit declares a charge against this Chaos unit over here. At this point in time, this unit now gets to fire Overwatch at this unit. So this is to represent as this unit is coming into assault, this unit is firing back at them. Overwatch works just like a normal shooting phase, except you're doing it in your enemy's turn. So while it's the Space Marine's turn right now, this Chaos unit is getting to use essentially a shooting phase. So they're going to fire their weapons just as they normally would in the shooting phase at these Space Marines. There is one exception though. There's one difference in this case. The difference is that when these Space Marines over here fire at these Space Marines, they don't use their normal ballistic skill. If you remember from the shooting phase video, ballistic skill is the number on the die you have to roll equal to or greater to make sure you hit the actual model. So in this case, their ballistic skill might be something like a 3 or 4, meaning they would have to roll a 3 or 4 to hit these guys, and then of course they would roll again to see if they wounded them. In this case, in Overwatch, you always need a 6 to hit the unit coming in. So these guys would fire their weapons, but they would have to roll a 6 to hit them. They would then again roll to wound, and the wounding would be the same as the shooting phase, meaning they would look at their strength and compare it to these guys' toughness, and all that would be the same. But just remember in Overwatch, the unit that's getting charged, like these Chaos Space Marines, have to roll a 6 to hit these guys coming in. Some other things you need to know about Overwatch is that you can actually fire Overwatch multiple times in the same phase. So in this case, let's say these Space Marines declared a charge against these Chaos Space Marines. They fired Overwatch at this unit and maybe, let's say, killed a couple of them. This unit then would roll to charge in here, and let's say they rolled Snake Eyes, double ones, meaning they only moved about 2 inches and weren't able to get within 1 inch of this unit here to make this successful charge, which means the charge fails and they don't actually move. But then let's say this player also chooses this unit of Space Marines over here to charge this unit as well. So they declare a charge against the Chaos Space Marines here, and again, these Space Marines are able to fire Overwatch at this unit. Now let's go back to that original scenario where this unit again declares a charge against the Chaos Space Marines. But this time, let's say, okay, the Overwatch killed maybe one of their Space Marines, but then the rest of the unit, they rolled a 7. They were successfully able to get into an assault range of this unit. So now these two units are locked in combat. Then the Space Marine player also decides to charge this unit in to this Chaos Space Marine unit here. This time, because this unit is within 1 inch of the Chaos Space Marines, the Chaos Space Marines are no longer able to fire Overwatch at this unit. So this unit is freely able to roll die to get into assault range of the Chaos Space Marines. Okay, and before we move to the fight phase, there's one more thing you should know about the charge phase, and that is something called heroic intervention, and this actually applies to the enemies, or in this case, like the Chaos Space Marines. It's not their turn, okay? But they can perform something called a heroic intervention. So after our Space Marines here make their charge moves, so they all get into whatever assaults that they're in before they go into the actual assault phase, like this unit getting into assault of these Space Marines over here, these Chaos Space Marines, the Chaos Space Marines are able to make something called a heroic intervention. When they have a character that's within 3 inches of an enemy unit, so in this case, here is their Chaos HQ Lord over here, and he's within 3 inches of these Space Marines that just made this assault charge, he is able to move 3 inches closer to try to get near these enemy Space Marines here. So even though he wasn't declared in the charge, he's able to move closer to them to maybe help out in the assault. So one of the things that you need to keep in mind is you can only attack the units that you declared as a charge in the assault phase. So in this case, when you see a character near some of these units that you may actually want to assault, like in this case, this HQ Chaos Lord over here, this unit may want to declare them in the charge just in case he tries to come in and help out. So here's another example, and let's say that we've made our charges, and in this turn, the Space Marines charged this unit here, but let's say that this unit has been locked in combat with this Chaos Space Marine unit for maybe a couple turns now. So this charge didn't happen in the last phase, but this charge did happen. We're going to move to the assault phase now and learn how we do close combat. The first thing we need to do is select a unit to begin our assault with. So because it's the Space Marine's turn, any unit that charged or made a successful charge that turn gets to go first. So because these Space Marines charged this Chaos Space Marine unit in the last charge phase, they get to strike first at these Chaos Space Marines. Now, had this unit over here also charged in the last charge phase, they would also get to go first against these Chaos Space Marines. So the sequence would go, these Space Marines attack, and then these Space Marines attack. But let's show you another order here real quick. So we said these guys made a successful charge in their charge phase this turn, so they would attack first. But let's say that these guys maybe charged last turn and are still locked in combat with these Chaos Space Marines. Well, the way it works now, once all of your charging units have striked in the assault phase, you then alternate turns in assault between the player whose turn it is currently and the other player who's sort of defending right now. In this case, it'd be the Chaos Space Marines. Now, once you go into that alternating phase between me picking a unit to attack and assault, and then my opponent picking a unit to attack and assault, I get to start first because it's my turn. So after all of my charging units have attacked, so in this case, like this unit here, I now get to pick the first unit that's going to attack and assault, but then alternate between players. I know that sounds kind of confusing, so let me just show you here real quick. So again, this unit charged, so it attacks this unit first. Then I get to select a next unit to attack that didn't charge this turn. So in this case, it might be this one, and I'm choosing them to attack this unit over here next. Then it would go to my opponent's choice, and he would select one of his units to attack me. And because I don't have any other units left, he would then select another unit to attack me that's eligible to fight an assault, which of course is any unit that's within 1 inch of an enemy unit. So just to beat a dead horse, and I know this part is a little bit complicated, or kind of sounds confusing anyways, it's actually pretty straightforward, but let me explain this just kind of one more time. So let's again say that we have a few units out here now, so just I think it'll be better shown if we have multiple units out. Let's say that it's the Space Marines, the purple Space Marines turn right now. They charged with this unit into this Space Marine unit this turn. So now it's the assault phase, and this unit gets to go first because it charged this turn. So it makes its assault attacks against this unit here. Then it goes into that switching back and forth between my units and my opponent's units in the assault phase. But because it's my turn, I select the first unit. So let's say I select this unit, they attack these guys over here. Now it goes to my opponent's turn. Let's say he selects this unit that I just attacked and attacks these guys here. Okay, then it goes back to my turn and I select this unit back here to attack them. Then it goes to my opponent's turn. He selects this unit to attack these guys. Then it goes back to my turn and I take my HQ and I also attack them. And then it goes back to his turn and he selects his HQ and he attacks them. Boy, I know that was complicated, maybe overkill, but I just really wanted to make the point on how this kind of works, because it is a little bit tricky in that your models essentially get to strike first if they charge that turn, but then it does this switch back and forth after that. Okay, now that all that confusion is done with, let's go back to a simplified example of how to actually complete an assault phase. So let's say that this unit charged in during its turn, and this is the result of the charge. And as you can see right now, they're not all within 1 inch of this enemy unit over here. In fact, when you move into the assault phase, the first thing you do is what's called a pile-in move. A pile-in move essentially is a 3-inch move where these guys get to move closer to the enemy unit. This is actually really important because when you get to the next step, which is picking models to attack with, models are only able to attack an enemy unit if they're within 1 inch of an enemy model, or if they are within 1 inch of one of their friendly models that are within 1 inch of an enemy model. So as an example of that, these guys would pile in and they would move 3 inches closer to this enemy unit here, just like that. Now, of course, these 4 here are within 1 inch of these enemies. In fact, they're pretty much base to base. These 2 models back here would make their pile and move 3 inches up closer to the enemy unit there. And they're maybe not within 1 inch of the enemy unit, but they are within 1 inch of these models, which are within 1 inch of the enemy models. So in this case, these guys would get to attack. Now, just for an example here, let's say that these models were actually kind of strung out in the unit, and they couldn't even quite get within 1 inch of one of their friendly models up here with the pile-in move. So these guys back here, if they were sort of outside of 1 inch from one of these closer friendly models, they would not get to attack in the assault phase. They might have to wait till the next turn to move even closer to get into assault. Alright, so now that our unit is in assault with this enemy Chaos Space Marine unit, we get to select the models that are going to attack. So in this case, all 6 of our Space Marines are within 1 inch of the enemy unit there, or they're within 1 inch of one of their friendly models that are within 1 inch of the enemy unit. It kind of represents them fighting in 2 ranks. Now there are some restrictions on who these guys get to choose to attack. For one, they have to be within 1 inch, which I already explained that. But the other thing is if they charge this turn, they are only able to select targets who they declare to charge against. So in this case, if they declare to charge against this enemy unit, they're good to go. They're in assault with them and they can deal their attacks to them. So no problem here. But what if, as described earlier, the Chaos Space Marines had their HQ, their Chaos Lord, over on the side here, and we didn't declare a charge against him. We only declared a charge against these guys. Well, had this guy made a heroic intervention, which we said was that 3-inch move closer to an enemy unit, so in this case, after I made my charge, the Chaos player says his HQ would declare a heroic intervention and move 3 inches up to now be in assault range of these guys. My Space Marines can only target these Chaos Space Marines. They will not be able to deal any attacks to this HQ over here. However, he'll of course be able to hit them. My Space Marines will not be able to return the attack because they did not declare him in the charge. This is why it can be helpful when you're declaring your charges. If you see an HQ that is, within 3 inches maybe of the unit that you actually want to charge, that you go ahead and actually declare him as well, just in case he does decide to get into combat. Okay, and I'm not going to get into too much detail about how to resolve a close combat attack because we went into a lot of detail in the shooting phase and it essentially works the same, but I'll show you which characteristics you're going to need to look at. The first thing we need to know, and you can see we added models to our example here, let's say that this unit actually charged all 3 of these Chaos Space Marine units, so they're eligible to attack any of them at this time. Well, this is 1 unit of Space Marines, and they're in close combat with 3 different units of Chaos. Your unit can actually attack multiple units if it's eligible. You just have to distribute your attacks and declare where they're going. So in this case, I might say that these 3 models want to put their attacks on the HQ here, and again, they're within 1 inch of him, so they can declare those attacks against him. Whereas maybe this model is going to put one of his attacks into this unit here, and then these 2 Space Marine units will put their close combat attacks into this unit of Chaos Space Marines over here. So although I have 1 unit of Space Marines, I can actually distribute their close combat attacks to multiple eligible units, so long as they're within 1 inch, and I had declared a charge against all of them that turn, and it was legal. The other thing you can actually do is some models actually have multiple close combat weapons. You would know this because of the profile of the models that you're using. If you look at their data sheet, it might show multiple close combat weapons that they might be equipped with. If they have multiple attacks, you can actually declare how many attacks are going to be used for each melee weapon. So for instance, these Chaos Space Marines over here, they might have a Power Fist and a sword of some type. And if they had 4 attacks, they could say, well, I'm going to put 2 attacks to my Power Fist here on this Space Marine right here, and then 2 attacks with my sword on this Space Marine right here. So they're splitting up their attacks, their 4 attacks, with the 2 different melee weapons they might have. However you choose to split your attacks, just make sure you declare all of those attacks before you roll any dice. So you're not going to declare one thing, roll the dice, resolve it, and then declare another. You're going to do it all at once. So just to give you an example of how you resolve the attacks now, let's look at the Intercessor's data sheet, since that's the example we've been using out of the starter set here. So let's pretend again that these Space Marines are Intercessors making an attack against some of these Chaos Space Marines over here, and just kind of look at what options they have for a melee attack against them. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this because this has been shown pretty closely in the shooting phase video, so go there if you have any kind of questions about how to resolve attacks. So just to see what you can do in the assault phase, I'm actually going to look at the Primaris Lieutenants here because they actually have some melee weapons. So if we take a look down here at the weapons, or war gear here, what we're going to see is they have some shooting weapons, so like the bolt pistol and auto bolt rifle, but you'll also see they have something called like a power sword, and it's a melee weapon, so it doesn't have any range. The type is that it's melee. When it says strength user, that's when you're actually going to look up here at the user's strength. So when you're making those to wound rolls, when you're looking at the strength versus the enemy's toughness, you're going to use the user. So in this case it would be strength 4 is how much power it actually has. We talked about the AP, which is the armor penetration value. So this is -3. So when the enemy rolls to make his saves, he's going to have to -3 from the die roll. In this case, -3 is pretty good. It means that the enemy would likely not get his save. And then the damage value. So this is how much damage this weapon, the power sword, deals. In this case, 1 damage. So when you're actually making attacks, so if we were thinking about the units that were just in close combat with one another, when I select a unit to make its attacks against the enemy unit in the assault phase, one of the things I need to know is how many attacks do they have? Well, this is when you're going to look at the A here. So in this case, the Primaris Lieutenants, they have 4 attacks each. So if they were in close combat with an enemy unit, they would get 4 die, essentially, to make attacks against the enemy unit. The next thing you would need to know is, well, how do they hit the enemy unit? Now, if you're in the shooting phase, and again, if you go back to the shooting video, this will be explained in a lot of detail. When you're in the shooting phase, you would look at the ballistic skill. So that's how accurate they are at hitting an enemy unit with a shooting attack. But of course, this is the assault phase, we're not shooting. So what you actually want to look at is the WS for weapon skill. So Primaris Lieutenants are actually a little bit more accurate when it comes to fighting in close combat than when they are shooting at an enemy. So in this case, they would only need a 2 or greater to make a successful hit roll against an enemy unit in close combat. For every hit roll that was successful, they would then need to roll to wound, and I just explained what you would do there is you would look at the strength of the attacker compared to the toughness of the target enemy unit. You'd go back to that chart that was shown in the shooting phase where you look to see how much greater your strength is versus their toughness. If your strength was equal to their toughness, so in this case, if their toughness was 4, your strength is 4, you would need 4s to wound. If your strength was greater than their toughness, you would need a 3. If your strength was twice as great as their toughness, so maybe your strength was 8 and their toughness was 4, you would only need a 2 to wound. So that's when you look at that chart, and that's shown in the shooting phase video. So check that out if you need help with it. So I know we skipped over a lot of that, but again, if you have any confusion, go back to the shooting phase video because it essentially operates the exact same, except this time you're using weapon skill instead of the ballistic skill to hit. So if this was the Space Marines attack phase, they would make their attacks against units. Those units would again get to make saves, their armor saves, if they were eligible to anyways, against those wounds that went through. They could use their armor save or they could use their invulnerable save, but of course, because it's close combat, they don't get any benefit from cover to their armor save. So just as an example, without rolling any dice, this unit may attack this unit here. Let's say maybe a few wounds go through. This unit then gets to make any saving throws against those wounds. Let's say they fail a couple, so those models are now removed. We then go to what's called the consolidation phase, so these guys get to move 3 inches closer to the enemy unit. Of course, they're already kind of locked in combat with these two, but maybe they move up just a little bit more to make sure they're still in close combat range of these guys. The opponent then gets to choose a unit to attack back with. Maybe he chooses this unit. They put their attacks onto this unit. This unit allocates the wounds and makes saves. Let's say they lose a couple here, so they lose 2. These guys consolidate. Because the enemy or the opponent has 2 other units to strike back with, he then chooses another unit. So let's say maybe this one. Let's say they kill off this guy. They consolidate in, and then his HQ maybe kills 1 more here. So even though this unit was able to successfully charge in, you can see it took a toll on them for attacking so many different units. They ended up losing quite a few. And this is pretty much how the assault phase works. There's one more phase that we're going to get to in the next video called the morale phase, so stay tuned. So I hope you liked this video. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to stick around to watch the next phase, which is going to be the morale phase. If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you want to watch more Wolfpack Wargaming, please hit the subscribe.